when we talked earlier today, you mentioned something about Bulgaria being able to be showcase for Reformed Christianity, a Christianity that's comprehensive in worldview. Give us a vision for a society like this. What does it look like? The family, the church, the civil government, the economy, the scientific investigation in such a society, the law, the legal systems. Can you give us just a short overview of how such a society can work and how it can show the world the glories of God's kingdom in the gospel?
Well, you have to begin with the individual because that's who is responsible before God. You begin with self-government under God by means of the Scriptures. And then that is extended to the family, and we hope at least is extended to the local congregations, so that there is a consistent viewpoint presented within the family and to the other congregation, members of the congregation, regarding God, man, law, causation, and time, the covenantal outlook. And we go to the Scriptures to find how that is done. The next step, I think, is communal support as much as possible for small businesses, because you have to have capital to extend the kingdom. That doesn't mean everybody has to be a businessman to launch the business, but everybody, as much as he can, should be a participant in business activity using principles of business, biblical principles of honesty, to become marks or bright lights within the society, cities on the hill, in other words, of good business practices. Now, Jews have done this for a long, long time and have essentially purchased peace within the societies because nobody wants to lose them. The Armenians, historically, have worked in much the same way. They've been very good businessmen. The point is, if you provide a good service to people, reliable service, the reputation of good service, low prices, support for anyone who has experienced like a broken device or something that doesn't work well, you come and you say, I'll fix it. Over a period of time, that kind of testimony begins to persuade people that there's something unique going on here. Charity is another area. Now, in the West, the hospital was an important aspect of the Western development of Christianity. One of the most important men in the history of Protestantism was John Wesley, who founded the Methodist movement. And he had an essay on money, which Christians around the world should read. And he had a phrase in it which was a three-part commandment. And he said, earn all you can, save all you can, give all you can. That very brief testimony changed the lives of a whole subculture in Britain in the 18th century. And within 100 years, the Methodists, who had been at the bottom of the economic pile in 1740, by 1840 were middle class, upper middle class, well-educated people. In 1 century, that principle changed the lives of the Methodists. Earn all you can, save all you can, give all you can. That meant don't consume all you can. That's the point. You use God's blessings economically to build up your business, to build up capital in the society, but also to share, to have the reputation of doing good things with the money for people who are poverty-stricken. This testimony can be seen. And so we call it word and deed evangelism. That the deeds of the individual are consistent with the words of the individual, and that people in society can see it. Now, in the Old Testament, you certainly had that in Deuteronomy 4, verses 4 through 8, where Moses said that the world will see that what great God is this that has such wonderful laws. That's evangelism through law. That's evangelism through deed. Now this takes time. The Methodists did not climb out of poverty in one generation. It took 3 or 4 generations to do this. It takes time to do this, to restore the foundations of a society. Capital development takes time. The skills of business take time. You don't get these skills overnight. But as the children are given the vision of sacrifice involved in save all you can, earn all you can, give all you can, as 2 or 3 generations of young people have adopted that as their goal, then you will begin to see a transformation of the society. And the attitude towards thrift and the attitude towards the future and the attitude towards righteous dealing will affect every society around the Bulgarians, or if there ever is one that does it. If there is a city on the hill, people around Bulgaria, or whatever the nation would be that does it, will say, why are they rich, or why are they successful? Or why have they avoided the disasters that have struck us? Not because they necessarily want to adopt the confession of faith of Bulgaria, but they want the fruits of Bulgaria. And that specifically is what Moses told the people of Israel would happen if they were covenantally faithful. So we're not making this up. This is basic to the Christian outlook, or should have been basic for 3,500 years. If a society or a nation finally persuades itself that this is the way of social transformation, then that society will become the city on the hill. I think Bulgaria is a likely candidate. It could be done. It's gone through the ringer. It knows what doesn't work. That's a tremendous advantage, to have recent experience with what worked catastrophically, where you lost your freedom, you lost your wealth, you lost your sense of national identity, you lost all the benefits that had prevailed before communism and got none of the advantages that Western capitalism would have provided. It was the worst of all possible worlds. Eastern Europe had that generally. Now, Eastern Europe is in bits and pieces and fits and starts, as we would say, is coming out of it. But it's not consistent. It's not systematic. They're better off than they were 30 years ago. That is for certain. They are way better off than 30 years ago. But they're still in the shadow of the old communist worldview, which was based on theft and envy and bloodshed and revolution and power. And that's what undermines a society. And if Eastern Europe can shed the skin, the old skin of the communist worldview, and replace it with a Christian worldview, then Eastern Europe will become the city on the hill. And I would hope, if any nation could do it, I hope Bulgaria would be the nation. Bulgaria has tremendous advantages. The income tax rate, at least, is low compared to the West. There is a great penetration of digital technology and the web into Bulgarian society. The ability of Bulgarians to communicate with each other is very high. And that means the division of labor is very high. And prices are relatively low, so it has a competitive advantage in the international markets. The question is, Will they earn all they can and save all they can and give all they can, or will they adopt consumerism, which the West can indulge itself in only because the West is so rich? America can be a consumerist society because we have so much capital. We're eroding the capital, but in the interim, we're living high on the hog. Pretty soon the hog's dead, and then consumerism stops. If Eastern Europe looks to the consumption patterns of the West, they'll get the complete wrong idea. We're in the capital consumption phase. That's not where Eastern Europe ought to be. Eastern Europe should be in the capital expansion phase. And if Eastern Europeans can figure this out and take advantage of it, then they will be eventually, I believe, they will be the dog that wags the tail. That's going to take several generations. But Western Europe's headed in the wrong direction. And the United States, because of its tremendous deficits, is also heading in the wrong direction. Eastern Europe should not look at the enormous consumption of the West and say, that's what we want to imitate. Eastern Europe should ask, how did the West get into a position where it can consume so much? How can America be a consumerist society and seem to get away with it year after year with low savings rate and deficit spending and borrowing from China and Japan? How does America do this? And the answer is America had 200 years of capital accumulation. That's how America can be a consumerist society. You can't get there overnight. You have to go through the same pathway of thrift and innovation and free capital markets where people don't steal from each other and legislate envy-based laws to steal from each other. Don't imitate the consumerist side of the West. Imitate the capital expansion of the West that took place from, say, 1830, 1820 through the 1970s and 1980s. That's what Eastern Europe should look at to say, what do we want to be like? Don't look at the West in the condition that it finds itself today. Look to the history of the West to find out how it got in this condition of enormous capital which can now be consumed. Don't consume the capital, expand the capital. That would be what I would tell anybody in Eastern Europe, or if you want to call it Central Europe, anyway, the kind of Europe that we regarded in the West as Eastern Europe under communist domination. You've gotten the communist monster off your back. Don't put a socialist monster or a welfare state monster or a consumerist monster on your back to replace the communist monster that you got off your back. That would be, in the biblical phrase of exchanging one devil and getting 7 new ones to replace it. That's unwise policy. Look to those aspects of the West that were successful, which are basically Christian, and imitate those. Don't imitate the failure of the people across the border. Imitate the successes of the people across the border. That's what I would tell anyone in Eastern Europe.